I'm Jen Taylor Skinner, and this is The Electorate. This is a special post-democratic debate episode featuring activists Wagatwe Wanjuki and Anoa Changa.
Nice.
In this episode, I continue my post-debate analysis with Wagatwe Wanjuki and Anoa Changa covering the second night of the first Democratic primary debates, and we jump right into discussing the viral story of the night, the exchange between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. Enjoy. Second debate is over, and I do not want to keep the listeners waiting. Let's just jump to it. Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. The fire. Discuss.
Ooh.
I don't know what she was listening. I don't know what was on her playlist before she got on stage, but she was ready. She had the one-liners popping. She was ready. She came off like the older sister adult in the room. And then she came off real sweet and she tried. I'm like, I need to talk to Joe, Vice President Biden. And I just need you to know that this really hurt my feelings because I was this cute little black girl who got buzzed. And then she turned it up. She tried to give, she's like, I tried to be nice. And then she turned up on him. I'm like, I got my issues with her, but I have a newfound respect for the Senate. I mean, not that I don't respect her, but with her and Cory Booker in this issue, because it's not like they've ever come off as the most strongest, black, pro-black issue people. Not that they're not black or they're not committed to racial justice or anything like that, but they don't seem very militant about being black. Yeah. And again, they're senators, so, not that they would be necessarily, but the way both of them have directly spoken to Biden on this issue, considering so much of the Black Democratic leadership has defended him on this issue, I actually have been very impressed by the past week and a half with both of them. But her tonight taking that's being able to get that in that question and being able to insert herself rightfully as the only black person and black woman on the stage, was poignant, I thought.
Yeah. And you said what was on her playlist? I know what was on her playlist. Lizzo's Truth Hurts.
Lucky Buck might have been in there too.
Yeah, I was really impressed. And I think that was one of the moments where I think we're just at the place, right, where we are in an age where we can have multiple black people and also we can choose and pick and choose. I don't feel like we have this obligation, oh my God, this one black person. So it was cool to see Kamala remind us though that this is what you can have. Also, Kamala's a cop, blah, 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 meme, all of that, sure. But also there's still, she still has experienced blackness in this country. And that's something that can't be replicated by any white guy or white woman or, any non-black person on stage.
Yeah, we were talking about this offline, but I did, regardless of how you feel about her positions or her policies or her past position as, DA, I knew from her performances on committees and just, in the public eye, I knew she was going to bring it, right? I just knew she was going to bring it because that's who she is. That's who we are, right? You don't get to that level as a black woman without having a fire under you already.
Yeah. And I also love the technique, honestly. It was so well planned. And did you see her tweet? Afterwards
the picture of the little girl.
Yes, I was like, oh my God, this is actually amazing. It was so well done, and I was just like, this woman is on top of it. It seemed practiced and not in an authentic way, just sort of she knew what she was doing, and I feel like she knew how delicate this could be, and it could be used, because any woman who's assertive, especially a black woman who's assertive, right, can be read as aggressive. And so that was cool to see, I'll say, as a black woman, and seeing that, I'm wow, this person's running for the United States of America, and I'm watching this, and that's cool.
That exchange, between them two, he was unrepentant. I mean, he's been clear that he's unapologetic, right? He's not apologizing for anything. He gave a really horrible defense and explanation. He invoked states' rights and local control, things that we know very well from history that have been utilized to suppress Black people in particular, brown and other people as well, and like states' rights. Like that was just so alarming. I didn't want the Department of Education to tell people they had to bus. Like busing is fine if people choose to do it, huh? And enacting remedies to address systemic racism and segregation is okay as long as people agree to make themselves uncomfortable to do it. We're never going to move forward with someone like him. In fact, Joe Biden would set us back. I mean, not nearly as bad as what has happened with the Trump administration. And I think when he's criticized, people need to not say, well, he's better than Trump. Okay. I mean, so what? Somebody's dog is probably better than Trump. But what happened tonight with Biden when he tried to, that was very ugly. And I'm sure, the three of us can think about experiences we've had with older white men in particular, where they have done something so blatantly wrong and we've had to correct them. And because of our position or junior status in a professional capacity, I know I'm definitely speaking for myself because I know my first year out of law school, my first year as an attorney and my first job with a well-meaning, nonprofit, do-gooder, liberal outlet who also love to throw around Barack Obama's name a lot in Chicago. I had this experience with, one of our chief, head staff counsel and our executive director, both much older white men, trying to carefully correct them on things and being told I was wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about, even though I am a Black woman that has grown up in a Black family, in a Black community, having had a Black experience. And at that time, I had younger Black children, but I've been raising Black children at this point now of my life for almost 18 years, right? So it's that just evokes something so much in me watching her experience that. But then also for him I don't know if many people caught this, he threw in her face that she came out of law school as a prosecutor and he was a public defender, as if somehow he has the moral high ground compared to her. However, the question I have is, how long and in what capacity was Joe Biden really working? Because I'm getting some very different answers in my request for research on Twitter right now. Some folks are saying it was less than a year. Some folks are saying it was only part-time as his main job was at a law firm. And that's a whole nother different conversation scenario too. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit more and see exactly what it is. But this was my one criticism about Hillary Clinton as well. When she ran, when she talked about work at the Children's Defense Fund before she passed the bar, and for us as lawyers, particularly as Black women and Black men too, we would never be able to claim some of the things that they as older white people are able to claim as experience or their value. We're never allowed to claim that on our resumes. It's never a part of our worth. If we don't have particular experience, then our word is not valuable. And for him to stand on that stage and do that, particularly if he wasn't he had some, because I was like, that's odd. And I was like, I don't think I ever knew that he worked as a public defender. And so I was like, no, it was for a very short period of time. And somebody else was like, well, I think it was only part-time according to his website. So if that isn't, fact checking him, I think fact checking Joe Biden, because Joe Biden believes in his own mythology so deeply. It's really important in a way in which, and it doesn't even matter whether he intended it for it to come out that way towards her. He was, he's a different type of combative than Bernie Sanders, right? Like Bernie has no self-awareness and, comes off like that little kid that just doesn't know that they seem like they're, you know what I'm saying? Like he probably thinks he's responding normally, or no, he's like an old person that doesn't have his hearing aid in, right? Like he doesn't realize he's shouting at you because he can't hear. And I do apologize. I don't mean that to sound, anti-old people. Ageist? My stepdad, I don't mean to be ageist or anything. My stepfather has a hearing aid, and that's just what happens. When he doesn't have it in, he talks really loud. And it can, if you don't know any better, you might think he's yelling at you, but he just can't hear. He just doesn't know he's talking loud. So I don't know. Bernie might be yelling at everybody. I don't know. But Biden is a little slicker with it. But it was really disconcerting actually watching that exchange. And he literally had no remorse for what she was expressing as her experience.
Yeah, that's his thing, though. He's been called out on a lot of things and he never apologizes. And the thing is, between the three of us, knowing our backgrounds, we have all met Joe Biden at some point in our careers and in our lives, right? And they never apologize, right? And actually, and I'm very defensive about the ageism thing, right? Because I don't think it's a function of age, right? Look at Barbara Lee or Maxine Waters or, some of the other older women or older people. What's that?
I said good black don't crack. That must extend to other areas.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of,
right.
it's not just that.
Right.
I'm trying to think of some other people
Elizabeth Warren just turned 70.
older.
I didn't know Elizabeth Warren was closer in age to them like that. I thought she was like younger in her 60s. I didn't realize she was turning 70. So no, that's a good point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, I don't think it's a function of age. I just think it's a function of, they were part of an era and they chose a side of that era. And for Joe Biden, it was the era of people who do not want Black kids to be, to be bused, right? Like, that was the era. That was the side he chose. And like now he's trying to go back on it because he's trying to run in a modern election and it's just not working for him, right?
Oh, well, just to follow up on that, there's something about Joe Biden, I feel like, or this like primary so far, I feel like there's like this new energy of like new politics and energy of old politics, and like sort of the politics I can fuck with, like, oops, well, sorry. But you know what I mean? I was going to try not to curse, but like the politics, I fuck with or whatever. And then like the politics, I'm like, this is the stuff that made me think it wasn't for me. And I feel like Biden very much represents that like politics I think we need to move away from, the narcissist politics, basically, right? Like it's narcissism. Like if you can't admit wrong, if you think that's a bad thing, and like the snide comments, like you said, like the combativeness is different with Biden even versus Bernie. And I feel like they all have different types of narcissisms, and it's not like they're all objective. It's not like a bad thing. I'm not like trying to diagnose people, but just in the sense of like when people get so much power and privilege for so long and like are around people who kind of have to defer to them for everything for decades and decades, I think that really does impact how a candidate like interacts with others and like with the public. And so for me, I think the debate like really solidified that for me with Biden, just the way that he was acting. And yeah, like the way that he could have stood up and like surprised all of us when Kamala like called him out, and he failed the test again. Like when would we ever expect anything different from him?
Yeah. And, this isn't about age necessarily, but he just seemed emotionally frail. I mean, I laughed because I was just thinking about like, I'm picturing her just calling him out and just like hammering him on that issue over and over again. And he just seemed to just shrink and shrink and shrink, and again, I don't want to imply that this is like an age thing, like he's like a shrinking old man or anything like that. But it's just like his posture, right? You could tell that he was like losing that fight, and I, a little bit of me just felt a little bad for him. I don't know. I mean, I don't really in the long run, but I just felt bad that he just wasn't. He just couldn't.
That's because you are a darling, sympathetic, empathetic, wonderful human being. I, on the other hand, am evil and petty, and do not feel bad for him at all.
Well, this is like his 16th run for president. I mean,
he's never done well before, and the only reason why he's doing well now is because his famous black friend is like our favorite president.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah. I want to compare. So I know that this is a no-no, but I think I can get away with it because I'm a Black woman, right? So I want to compare, because I think about that a lot. I think about, Cory Booker, who was last night, and I think about Kamala Harris, and I think about Barack Obama and the way that they were received and the way that they present themselves to the public when they're at this stage of their candidacy. And I was thinking about Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, and thinking about your comment about, I didn't, she didn't come across as somebody who's really militant or, like really kind of, black, you know what I mean? But I think that she is more so than Obama was at this stage, right? Like he was closer to Booker to me, although he wasn't all the way on that love side than Harris. Like she is being unapologetically Black, I think.
I think that's the HBCU experience.
Yeah. I mean, she did have a drum line.
Yeah, I mean, I met her last year at Netroots Nation, actually. And I would agree. Like, there's, like you see politicians, but she had an all Black team with her. And I still remember that. And it didn't feel like a tokenizing thing. It was just like natural. Like, of course, I'm from Oakland. I'm going to have Black staffers. And there's just something about that where I feel like it was also a different era with Obama.
Team No White Men the past two nights has won. Because all of them have looked. I mean, tonight, for example, you have Hickenlooper. You had well, Swalwell. I will say I do appreciate him with the Biden quote and the pass the torch.
That was amazing.
That was clever.
That was so good.
I must update my profile picture now to say pass the torch. That was really good. Yeah. Like, and he was like, I'm not ready.
He just kept saying it too.
He was like, I'm not ready. I'm not passing the torch yet. And it's just like that.
Oh, okay.
Like, really?
Yeah. I know what I was going to say about Harris. I was just going to say that, and this may sound conspiratorial, but I just wonder, because when she came out with her campaign, and I'll stop talking about Harris in a while, but I'm just kind of like really taken by this moment tonight. She did really well. But like when she first came out, she was the front runner. Like she had the strongest campaign. She announced like first, right? Yeah. And I wonder if this impression that we got of her, like, that she's not going to bring it, as a Black woman. She's going to be more on the kind of, kind of centrist or kind of like, middle right. And she's not really kind of like with us. I wonder where we got that impression, because she's never really done anything, to my knowledge, to give us that impression. I wonder if it was just kind of fed through social media. Do you know what I mean? I'm being a conspiratorialist right now.
I think that there are people with valid concerns and like reservations, but social media with like misrepresentation and misinformation and trolling, it has kind of like conflated it to make it seem like, at least that's how I feel for me. Like I always had my personal like reservations, and just in terms of like knowing her history. And I think that has always been why I've been kind of hesitant, because I know for a Black woman to get where she is, right, especially as someone with like a legal history and being a DA, like you do have to conform to white supremacist standards to get that far for some, somewhat. So for me, I knew it wasn't because of social media, but just sort of like knowing what it takes, knowing what kind of Black people get up, or like what kind of behavior, right, of what kind of conformity they expect for you to get to that point, made me sort of suspicious. Just sort of like me not totally trusting Pete Buttigieg, like as a queer person, right? Like, cause like I know what it is, like how much conformity you need to have to really make it that far.
Yeah. Okay. So, I've gotten the Harris thing out of my system.
Well, I just want to say though, I will say back to what you said earlier about how, seeing how she's handled like the hearings and stuff, like it's very clear, like even though I've been critical of her because of, the prosecutorial, and my whole thing has always been that her record, it's not disqualifying. And it's not dispositive. Like she's not, it's not an end game, right? But I felt that she did come out strong, but I felt that they never really had a strong response to it. And the way she's chosen to deal with it, I know still offends a lot of people who have legitimate criticisms, right? And I'm not talking about, folks who are like, oh, she's a cop, oh this, oh that. Like I don't really get into all of that, right? Like I don't see value in that necessarily. I know some people feel strongly about that, but I do think that there are specific things that it's like, okay, can you at least acknowledge this? And she kind of like meanders around it. However, right, my criticism also was that I just felt like they could have dealt with it better. And there was an article, I want to say it might have been Political, maybe like 2 weeks ago, that was talking about how Maya, her sister, has actually struggled with a team internally to kind of get them to handle it differently, that's more consistent with progressive values. And I thought that was interesting. And I was like, oh, so I'm not completely off, because if Maya says it and Maya's super smart, then I think what we're seeing now is maybe there's been a realignment. And what my interpretation is, there's been a realignment internally and how she can be perceived as strong and really leaning into who she is, right? Because I think for what you were saying, Jen, about like, with the way Obama was at this point in time, like Obama, was basically like, the everyday American dude who just happened to have a funny African name and a Black dad he didn't know, right? Like he wasn't, it's like he was Black because he had the Black family, like his family was Black, right? But he had a white grandma. He made sure to let everyone know he had a white grandma. You know, he had to make sure to show he was really American. He grew up in Hawaii. That's so far removed for a lot. So it's interesting thinking about him and the way you compare it. And I appreciate the way you were saying, like, we're not going to get into like judging people's blackness, because I also did, like, even though I've criticized her, I've also defended her because I think it's absolutely insane the way people pick apart whether or not she really is black or can she rightfully claim being black.
Yeah.
That type of conversation drives me nuts. And it's, you know, there's some issues with different things that go into that. But like, I do see that no matter who we get, we have to somehow figure out how we build accountability in the process. But I think, you know, we can acknowledge that people do well, still find a way to be accountable and talk about their record and the things that we would like for them to improve upon. But I'm definitely team Biden pass the torch. You know, and I just thought she did really, she did well, like, when she was like, you know, the food fight, you know, fine. Like, you know, we don't, Americans don't want to come watch a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on the table. That was good. She clearly, I need to look and see, like, sis, did you do moot court? Because these are good. I mean, like, I'm thinking about things from trial ed and moot court. I was like, ooh, she went and reviewed some notes. Like, it was good.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think that the three of us, this is really good to talk about her, because the thing about the three of us, I think that our backgrounds, we've been in that position where people might have been suspicious of who we are and our blackness. You know what I mean? So I'm particularly sensitive to that debate, right? Like, you know, being an attorney or going to an Ivy League school or, you know, whatever we are, like, as Black women, people questioning our blackness. So, you know, that really bothered me too.
And, you know, what's his face? Donald Trump Jr. tweeted, right? And I'm like, who's that awful person? He retweeted someone tweeting something about Kamala not being actually Black, because like, oh, she is half Jamaican and half whatever, you know, is it Indian? And so it kind of had that ADOS vibe to it, sort of like, oh, I'm tired of these, like, you know, non-African Americans taking our thunder and our jobs or whatever, and they don't speak for us. So it's going to be used. And I think that's something that I kind of was afraid of when Kamala announced, because I remember when Barack Obama, right, when he was running, and the constant attacks and all the racism, and I'm like, do I really want to hear all the misogynoir? And I feel like I'm like bracing myself, like it gets tiring to see other people argue things that could also be applied to yourself, you know. That's just it's just, I guess that's just like part of the price of breaking these barriers. But something I've been thinking about, especially with Donald Trump Jr. tweeting that nonsense.
Girl. Now I've gotten Kamala out of my system. Okay. So who is the other person that I thought I was really watching tonight? I was watching Buttigieg and Sanders. You know, I expected them to have more of a moment tonight than they did. Like, Buttigieg to me just seemed, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe it's my bias, but he just seemed flat. I felt like he was, you know, and I don't like to necessarily judge people's, you know, temperament on stage, you know, because that's often used against women. It's often used against Black people, you know, but his temperament, it seemed a bit like, you know, he didn't have that vibrancy that other people had on stage. And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't notice it per se. And it might just be because I always felt this disconnect with him. Like, I felt this stiffness with him and like not totally being, I don't know, I never found him charismatic, I guess. Maybe that's just my own bias, but I think Pete Buttigieg like really shines in those, like, when there's not 9 other people that he's competing with, basically, right? Like, because he does the, like, let me go to dinner with you, let me be on your HBO show, let me go on your podcast, let me, you know, he doesn't seem to be like a debate person.
Which is not good, right? Like, because you kind of have to be a debate person, right? Because, so here's what was happening to me. And like I said, I don't necessarily want to talk about temperament or like stage presence, because ultimately what matters is the substance. But because he kind of gives these, you know, intellectual answers that are kind of subdued, and they're not memorable, right? Like, I was trying to remember, like, oh, what was his stance on you know, climate change? Or what was his stance on certain? And he didn't necessarily set himself apart, because, you know, frankly, this entire Dem field, you know, they're pretty close on a lot of the issues. So you really have to bring it to set yourself apart. And I didn't feel that he necessarily did that, right? And I'm not really sure how substantive those answers were. Like, they just seemed kind of, yes, this is the right answer for this. And, I've thought about these facts, but, I can't really go deeper.
That's what I said, though, on Twitter, though. I was just like, he's the kid in class who doesn't do the homework, doesn't, participate and do the class project, but will turn in or show up for the final assignment, right? And cram to do just good enough. And like, I have a lot of problems with him, particularly when he talks. I mean, they all need to be fact checked. Whoever's moderating the next debate needs to really be hitting them harder on stuff, because they're skating by with stuff that's just not like when Pete he sounds so good. He's like, yes, I did have a problem policing and I didn't do a good job this time. It's like, dude, you've been in office for 8 years now? You haven't done a good job. There are several articles out about how you didn't do a good job the entire 8 years you've been in office. Like, he mentioned the FOP letter rebuking him. The person listed on the letter as a treasurer, I can't remember the last name, but the first name is Aaron. That cop is listed several times in so many different incidences that were not handled properly, from an advocate perspective, that has led to the current climate in South Bend. So they have a real serious issue. Like, one of the most problematic cops they have is in the FOP leadership. Like, they have a serious issue. That's not because he's been so stern. We all know as soon as you say something the FOP they don't like, they are on you. That don't mean he's been doing his job. And like you said, the other answers and things that he was talking about when he was like, what did he say? Medicare for those who want it. We don't have car insurance for those. Everybody has to have car insurance if they drive. And I think that this whole making insurance optional, I understand some of the concerns that people, and I'm not a health insurance person at all. And I live in a state that hasn't even been able to expand Medicaid, right? So I definitely understand that we need multiple levels to this conversation, and it's not going to be that simple that you just elect, a person who's all for it, and then suddenly within the first 100 days, magically we all have Medicare. Like, it's just not that simple. However, I'm really disturbed by Pete and a lot of his rhetoric around, well, we don't want to benefit. We don't want to do stuff that might residually benefit. We might somehow benefit rich people, so we don't want to do it. And that bothers me a lot. So you going to half step on helping the rest of us because you might benefit somebody who might have it. I mean, like, you seem like you're doing pretty decent. I don't want to benefit you then. Like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know.
No, I agree. That argument drives me bananas because it's like, well, rich people already benefiting the most and like disproportionately. So you don't want to help like 99% of people because like a fraction of the 1% might get help. Like, that just sounds ridiculous to me.
There was another problematic answer with, it was his response to what to do about student loan debt, right? It was something like, it started off, sounding empathic, like, oh, I have 6 figures in student loan debt. My husband has 6 figures in student loan debt. But, just like you can refinance your house, you can. And I just thought that was just so tone deaf. It's like, well, but people can't buy houses because they've got student loan debt. Like, what?
Pete Buttigieg is so white. I'm sorry. Like, when he said, oh, well, we have 6 figures. Like, I'm so like, that kind of annoyed
student
me.
Loan debt? Well, I'm trying to
like,
understand how they got as much student loan debt as they. So one, I'm like, is that 6 figures combined or individually?
Right.
One, two, how you got a house? Well, I mean, seriously, I got 6-figure loan debt, and I'm still trying to dig out from the 2008 2009 financial crisis 10 years later. I also am a single Black woman who's been raising kids through this whole time too. Those are single white men accumulating income and wealth and opportunity, right? Like, that is another thing that he does not consider at all in his analysis.
I didn't like that anecdote because I was like, no, you're totally on a different area. Because especially like with the refinance thing, like, oh, cool. So now I have to have good credit, which is an inherently racist, classist system. Right. It was just like, he's just very neoliberal. I feel like he's very white. And I feel like he's just like that kid that those types of kids I went to school with who didn't really hang out with anyone who wasn't rich like them, or at least like upper middle class or as privileged as them. And so it's like, I think he just genuinely has like, it's brand new for him, I think, to really think about populations differently than him. And I don't like that he's doing it just because he's running for president of the United States.
Right. And I get the feeling that he also does not care to learn. Right. Like, he's been kind of rising in the polls for a while now, and people have been critical of these issues. And, he hasn't really budged his numbers with Black voters. And, I just feel like he hasn't been prepared to answer those criticisms. And I just feel like, he's a younger Biden in a sense, in that he's just kind of unapologetic about not getting it.
Yeah. Like when they asked him about the police force getting whiter, right? He was like, well, I didn't do it because I couldn't do it. It's like, no, you could have, you just didn't. Like he couldn't even just say like, I failed to do that. It was just, he annoys me so much.
The thing is I'm trying to separate my personal feelings about, and I'm looking for something. Because people like him, or they used to like him. I don't think he's risen. I think he may even be flat or falling in the polls. I think he's falling, isn't he?
I think so.
And I've been looking and trying to see like what is it that captured people that made him rise in the first place? And I think that the media plays a big role in this, because he looks good and he talks well on camera. They love that. And so what they do is they just keep pushing people, and they keep ignoring the really important questions. Like, maybe if they had asked him in the beginning about what was going on in his hometown and the police department, maybe, we would have had some of the stuff figured out months ago. Yeah. Right. But they didn't. They were like, oh, how many languages do you speak? Oh, that's cool.
He took softball media, right? Because it was all about saturation. Like it seemed like he was avoiding the hard stuff for a while. And then I just didn't like how then he kind of shifted to like a listening tour, quote unquote, with Black people. So I'm like, cool. So now you're going to go travel. You're going to get paid as you travel the country, asking Black people to do free emotional labor to make you better at like potentially becoming president. Like that just feels like that's just like the white liberal stuff that like I just can't stand, and it's hard to see someone learn on the job to run for such a high position, But who else kind of did a kind of tour of like a Black listening tour, and it didn't bother me, and I'm not really sure why. Swalwell, right? He had this video that came out where he was going into neighborhoods talking, because this thing is gun violence, talking about gun violence in, Black neighborhoods or whatever. And for some reason, I don't know, that just felt more genuine to me. Like, I don't think he's going to go very far, right? But I hate to use this word, but he's kind of likable. I don't know. He's likable. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I think it's because like you said, his thing is gun violence. So it's like you can connect the dots. It's like, okay, well, he's trying to use his privilege. Probably, we can say, oh, he's using his privilege to highlight an aspect of gun violence that's been like underrepresented in the media that we don't, pay attention to. So he's going to try and bring it to the stage. Pete Buttigieg, what does he stand for? Neoliberalism? Like anyone even? I don't know. Like. What does he stand for? So.
He stands for, what's the word I'm looking for? When you speak multiple languages.
Multilingualism.
He stands for multilingualism for all Americans. That's terrible. I shouldn't have said that. Anyway.
Watch them take it too. They'll take the idea. No, I'm kidding.
We need to talk about Bernie Sanders. So
I guess
he, like Biden, is also like, I think usually in second place in the polls. He's kind of shrinking to me. So the first thing I noticed, he was given the very first question. And if I could have had a recording of his debate in 2016, I probably couldn't distinguish that answer because he has not. I just felt like he hasn't updated his messaging. Like he was running from, campaigns past, right? I don't know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. Right. Like, wasn't he asked something about identity politics? Like about his, like, he's still not good with anything that isn't economics, in my opinion. Right. And he didn't really answer that question. He like went back to like the economic thing. And then also he forgot to mention people of color. So all he did was mention, was it LGBT people, which kind of like seemed hard for him to say.
And he messed up the acronym.
He did? See?
How many letters did he leave out? Some letters, or you just add some?
He said like LGBT or something. He said he mixed it up, and maybe he was just talking really fast and he gets nervous. Like I think he doesn't do well if he's not giving prepared remarks. he does not do well at all with communicating with people, right? Like, I don't know if he gets nervous, because that was one of the things, having conversations with some of the, a couple people I know on the senior staff after She the People, was that he got nervous and lost his place and forgot what he was going to say and just quickly scrambled to think of something to say in that moment. I'm referring to when he was asked upon followed about white nationalist violence, he redirects, he didn't really answer the question. Then he started talking about his civil rights, experience or whatever. And my thing is, if that happens to him and he's having difficulty in moments where he has to speak off the top of his head, or when he's asked questions that are off script, then those are strategies, those are things that you all need to work on with him, not like, blaming other people or making excuses, which, I mean, with both Biden and Bernie Sanders, their politics are very different, right? I'm not gonna lump them together like that. But with both of them, you do see the people around them explaining what they mean way more than we see for any other candidate running right now. And that is, an entitled thing that happens with white men. And what we're saying doesn't necessarily have to do with anything with age, but we're seeing, white people generally, but white men in particular, right, in this conversation, we're seeing the two leading white male candidates, their surrogates, their staff, their supporters, have to overly explain for us when they're speaking plain language. We can hear them very clearly what they're saying. It's not like they're talking in parables like Marianne Williamson. Like, they're speaking very clearly and we hear the words coming out of their mouth. So you tell me, what he really meant to say was, or he forgot these other 3 sentences he also should have said. Well, that I don't know that I can trust that. Like, if it comes to these really clutch moments, and we have presidential candidates who are trying to be the president and they can't say what needs to be said. We see what already happens with someone who's not, completely firing exactly the way we need someone to be in that position. We don't need somebody else who can't completely do the job and communicate the job like they're supposed to. Like, I don't know. It concerns me.
That's a really good point. That was really good free advice that you just gave. I wish they would listen. I'm sure they won't.
I don't think either candidate is listening. I think they have staff. I'm pretty sure both of them. Not I'm pretty sure. I know for a fact Bernie has staff who are trying. I've talked to them, but with Biden, I assume Simone got a little testy with me last week when I said sad what people do to pay their bills. She got a little annoyed that I implied that the campaign was paying her bills, but it's like, if it's not paying your bills, why are you working for him? But I from the article we saw about how she and others had to pull him aside about the Hyde Amendment. So they're talking to him. They're trying to prepare him. Prep him better, I guess. But it seems like Bernie and Biden, they're stuck in their ways. They are who they are, and they think they know what is needed, and they're not listening. And we're a new generation in a new way, and we have a new way of analyzing and addressing and dealing with things. Like, Wagatwe, we've talked about this before, about like with him and just his lack of concern to understand about the whole issue with personal space and boundaries, right? Like, no one's saying you're necessarily, well, there are people who say this, but I'm not saying you're a rapist, dude. Yes, Trump is horrible. He's a rapist. He's a whole lot of things. But that doesn't excuse the fact that you don't respect women and our boundaries and our personal bodily autonomy. Like, you make fun of it whenever you get a chance.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, again, it just feels old school, right? It feels like the old school parenting, right? Like, okay, the leader, you just listen to the parent and it's because I said so, I really do feel like we're easing more into an age where you have to, it's a conversation, how it should be, right? You have to listen. Good leaders listen, they apologize, they prepare. I'm sorry, how are you running for president for so many years and still not be I don't know, just super on top? He's had a lot of stuff in his life, so let me not say that. But I would expect more. It just feels like he's coasting. Like, he knows he can coast on his name and on his friendship with Obama for a while, and he just needs to drop out, period.
Yeah, I think he's gonna start to see some drops, right?
One thing I wanted to mention is that I really want, this is something I think I'm gonna keep pounding the drum on. I want to have a president talk about what they're gonna do to reduce gender-based violence. I appreciate Kamala talking about, like, I wish, it sucks that like that part was when she went over time, but I really loved how she did bring up, right, like if an undocumented person's raped, they should be able to go to the police. Like, okay, fine, I'd rather the police not be there, but like, right. And she said like, these undocumented people are particularly vulnerable because they're undocumented, that abusers are targeting them, right? And like, I think we need, it made me think, I'm like, this is possible. We need to talk about what the president can do to like treat gendered violence as like the public health issue, the safety issue, the health issue, the financial issue that it is. So, again, went back to Kamala, but yeah, it was an interesting night. I feel like Kamala took up so much space that I feel bad that we didn't talk about like so many people like last time, but I also kind of appreciate that it felt like there's a clear winner.
Can I just ask you guys one more question? I just thought of a really good one. What's going to happen when it shrinks and it's Kamala and Warren on stage?
Oh, I don't know if I'm ready. Like, I don't want to like... I think it's going to be good because they're not nasty. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's going to be one of those like competitions where it's like two really good teams in different ways. And there's going to be a showdown and it's going to be like fun to watch.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, well, thank you so much. I will talk to you soon.
Thanks again. And I'm glad to got to, decompress with y'all.
Absolutely. This was good.